I laughed, it's not his fault, but it was probably 8, 9 years ago. And he died the night before Thanksgiving. With the doctor deciding that he was really in a coma. So we did not have Thanksgiving together in all those years. We have to have it on another day. So have we done something wrong and not made them feel comfortable? Or how do you help people that want to suffer so long?
I don't know, do you have answers to that?
Anna? No, you have not done anything wrong. Everybody finds their own way through their grief. And some people, their way is shorter than others. It's okay it's okay for their grief road to be as long as it is for them. You have not done anything wrong.
Yeah.
You can't change it, can you?
No,
Well, it may change itself,
right.
but you can't control it. What you're saying.
That's the whole family.
Sure.
There are some, 2 excellent books on grief. I don't remember the author's name at the moment. One is called Getting Grief Right, and the other one is It's Okay That I'm Not Okay. And they both address how our culture does not help people through grief and do it in a healthy, well way. That we want to speed people through grief. We want them to get well, pull themselves up on their bootstraps. They want them to go around the corner to a better world in a time span that in most cases, because we are uncomfortable, and because to really love somebody means you have to be willing to hurt, and we don't want to hurt.
Yeah.
I think it's very true. I just wondered if there's anything I can do or we can do to maybe make them feel like, well, it's time now.
I think you have to just wait lovingly.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something you're doing, the way is doing. Yes.
Talking about grief, I remember my husband passed away, and people were saying he's still breathing. Because there were many things that didn't go along with, and they could not understand. He said, I could not believe it. It was my husband,
Yeah.
father of my children.
Yeah.
But they were together for many years, But they're for each other now, he's not here anymore. I could not believe that people would not understand.
That's what you were saying
Yes.
too, that our culture wants to push us along without. It's hard to grieve with another person. I mean, you can't tell them I'm grieving with you. It sounds like I know your pain.
I don't remember.
Cliches are just terrible, or time goes on, or even biblical passages. God, yeah. But waiting patiently, lovingly, is something you're doing. Let's look at the first chapter of James, and it's addressed to the 12 tribes in the dispersion or diaspora. What's that mean? What are the 12 tribes in the diaspora? What is the diaspora?
When they left Egypt,
Pardon me?
they all scattered.
Who's all scattered?
The tribes of Israel.
Yeah, and that was happening long before Jesus' time, wasn't it? There were Jews in Rome, there were Jews in Turkey, there were Jews in Egypt, left over from way back and so forth. We even have archaeological evidence of it all over the place. That was called the dispersion. But it also was applied to Christians. Because you think about it, Paul was starting all these congregations over here. Maybe they weren't forced to go out, but he was starting them. And in 70 AD, when Rome leveled the city of Jerusalem, then that, you know how we used to do Mercury, splat. that further dispersed. So is James talking about the real 12 tribes or a symbolic 12 tribes?
Yes.
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 I think that's a good answer, yes. He's talking about, and if you look into the New Testament, the church is often called the New Israel. The New Israel. So it makes sense, the 12 tribes. Jesus had 12 disciples. That wasn't an accident. Okay. Let's just look at 2. 1, 2. First chapter. My brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of any kind, consider it nothing but joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing. What is your response? What is your reaction to this stress on trials, testing, and endurance? Yeah.
I've read some self-help books that say, you know, if you look at trials as an opportunity to learn something new, learn how to, you know, in other words, take it as more of a challenge than, oh my God, you know, look what's happening to me.
Yeah.
That you will, by going at it with a much more positive attitude, that I'm going to learn something from this. I'm going to come out, and knowing I'm going to come out stronger is a much better approach than the woe is me approach. Look what happened to me. Why God picked on me, you know.
There's so much to learn in that endurance.
I mean, and he
He's
says
talking
it.
about endurance.
Yeah, he says it right here. You know, here.
What does it tell you about those who are receiving the letter? What might it imply?
Well,
Why would he even bring
right,
up the
right,
subject?
right, life's tough right now. Something's tough right now.
For a lot of people. I mean, if it's the diaspora, it might be the Romans, it might be the Jews themselves, it could be anything. People dying they weren't supposed to, you know, because Jesus was returning and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's one of the themes here is look upon your trials as something positive that can happen in your life. Put up with them. Learn from them. Okay, I want you to look at verse 6 and 7 and 8.
Also in James.
Yes, first chapter, verse 6, 7, and 8. But ask in faith, never doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For the doubter, being double-minded and unstable in every way, must not expect to receive anything from the Lord. What does he mean, double-minded?
Wavering back and forth.
Between what and what?
2 different, situations or answers or.
And he's going to go on to tell you what those 2 ways are. This is where this letter relates to the so-called wisdom literature. Because in the wisdom literature, there is a negative way that leads to hell, leads to death, and there's a positive way that leads to God. And they're called the way of evil, the way of health, or the way of God. And so he's talking about the fact that we're on both paths at the same time. We get mixed over, crossing back and forth. We live in the world and we make the most of that with our riches and so forth. But on the other hand, we also question that because of the other way. So we're mixed, we're confused. Okay, so look, it goes on a little bit in verse 9. Let the believer who is lowly boast in being raised up, and the rich in being brought low. because the rich will disappear. He's got some very harsh things to say about the rich. Rich like a flower of the field. For the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the field, its flower falls and its beauty perishes. It is the same thing with the rich. In the midst of a busy life, they wither away. It just seems that this is one of the major themes in our lives today. I mean, we are very aware of billionaires. Can you imagine that? Billionaires. I mean, the good ones like maybe Bill Gates and his wife, and the not so good ones. This Fortune 500, you know, they come out with a 500 list of millionaires, but have they changed that to billionaires now? You know, the magazine, Fortune 500. I think they must have.
I don't subscribe. That's not.
I mean, if you ask me, that's a problem we have. It doesn't look like the poor in our midst are being helped all that much. Well, they are in certain circumstances. We're talking about Joseph's Code and the food bank and so forth. But generally speaking, we're told that the gap between the rich and the poor grows, continues to grow. And so I mean, that's not what we learned about democracy. There was a sense in which there was a shared wealth. I'm not talking about communism or socialism, or maybe I am. You know, maybe that's not so bad in some circumstances, without the dictators and so forth. Okay, somebody read me verse 22. Yeah, it does sound like it. That's true. Chapter 1, verse 22 through 28, to the end of the chapter. Somebody want to read that? Because it's really one of his most important statements.
Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like a man who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But the man who looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues to do this, not forgetting what he has heard but doing it, he will be blessed in what he does. If anyone considers himself religious and yet does not keep a tight rein on his tongue, he deceives himself and his religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world.
That's one of the most famous quotes from James. It's religion that's pure and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. But why isn't it clear there that, at least it is to me, is it to you, that James is talking about acting on beliefs? He's not talking about just acting and dismissing belief, and that's what he's been criticized for. From Luther, and not just Luther, but others. He's dismissing the importance of faith, belief, and so forth, of the gospel, and saying, do good. But is that the way you read that? Or do you read it as saying, look, put your faith in action, in motion? Now, don't let me talk you into that, because I realize that I feel it's obvious to me.
Is this where the Methodists came from? I mean, there are more social, their organization is more do oriented than I think Luther's in general.
I'm not sure where they're.
I mean, the method is how do you live your faith in the world?
It is method. It is about method. I don't know. I think it goes back to John and Charles Wesley, but I don't know. Can't answer that. But I think if we seek hear James correctly, we're gonna realize that that critique of James isn't fair. Here's what Luther said. In the first place, it is flatly against St. Paul and all the rest of Scripture, the letter of James, in ascribing justification to works. It says that Abraham was justified, Paul teaches, we talked about Abraham here. Now, although this epistle might be helpful and an interpretation devised for this justification by works, Luther's assuming that that's what this letter's about, justification by works. He says it right here. It cannot be defended in its application of works of Moses, statement Genesis 15, forget that. Therefore, that proves that this epistle is not the work of an apostle. So, Luther's saying, because it lacks the gospel, it lacks references to Jesus as such, explicit references to Jesus. It is, he called it a strawy epistle. Now, he wavered back and forth on it, but he never thought it ranked up there with Romans, with the Gospels, especially like John, and so forth. Tell me, just briefly, maybe just obvious to all of us, why did Luther oppose or put down or relegate this epistle to a minor role in the canon of the Scriptures? Why? Why?
One thing, with the Catholic Church at that time, that's what they were pushing.
Works.
Was works. And so this is going to be just the opposite of what he was trying to say, that we're justified through grace, not through what we're doing.
Yeah. And I hear you saying that he was so allergic to the subject of works because of his opposition to indulgences and so forth, seeing relics and saying this and that he was kind of blind to the possibility that this does not dismiss one's faith in God's grace, but acts upon it.
There are a lot of people who think, I'm doing good stuff for people, I don't have to believe in that Jesus stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, I hear that a lot.
Recent studies have come out saying a lot of people call themselves spiritual. I think that's what you're talking to.
Well, yeah, or maybe not even spiritual, but I don't like the word do good, but people who are concerned and they're charitable and whether they donate money or donate their time, but it's not done for religious reasons. They're just doing it because they think it's the right thing to do. So they don't.
Where would
really,
you put those people?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. This could be an argument here. They don't accept the grace component that we understand as Christians.
They don't
Well,
like
that's a
what
good question. In other words,
organized.
where do they fit in the continuum between non-Christian and Christian? They're doing the Christian thing.
Yeah.
Is that enough without saying, therefore I believe da 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 da? I mean, are they Christian by virtue of what they're doing? Even if they don't name.
Right.
Jesus.
That's a label. Christianity.
It's a good question.
Well, take the Muslim faith. I mean, they tithe. They seriously give money, 10% or whatever. I can't remember what they. That's almost a requirement. That's like going into Rod Parsley's church and you can't come out the door until you give. Type of requirement. And they do a lot of good. One of their philosophies is taking care of their poor people. And because, their origin, the tribal origin, they took care of their tribe, they took care of their people, and I think that's much more important in the Muslim community even than it is in the Christian community.
Well, maybe that is a string that ties us to them in some way.
Well, they did say
I don't know the answer to that question because I'm so tempted to applaud those people rather than those who go around spouting religion with their tongue.
Yeah.
What about the survey that Pastor Brad did Sunday?
I wasn't there.
Oh, well, what he did,
Did
he
he
said,
call that out?
he said, what's more important? He said, gonna do a little survey. He says, everybody hold up your hands that think that worship is more important. And then he took that survey and he says, now how many think that it's more important to go outside the church? And more
spread
people
the
said
word.
outside the church.
The
than
choice
worship.
between worship and service.
Of course,
And you had to pick one or the other.
Yeah, they pick one, you weren't allowed to pick both.
I would pick the third way, meaning that what I do outside the church is an expression of my worship of God.
Right, and I think that's.
Is that what you said?
weren't allowed to do that.
You weren't allowed.
He was trying to be.
Damn it, I did.
But I think that was a plan.
I don't, the problem is, it says worship and ritual and all those things are within the walls of the stained glass windows and so forth. And I've spent my whole career trying to convince people it isn't.
My Jewish cousin, I was just speaking to her the other day in regard to some old letters I was reading from her mother from way back in the 50s. And it was very interesting. But one of the things we got to talking about was religion and so forth and everything. And she says, you know, I think when I die, I'll be judged on how I treated my fellow man and what I did for others than how many times I was sitting in the pew. And I'm thinking, oh.
I know it really confronts us, doesn't it? I mean,
Well, especially if you think that the church is not a building. The church is the people. That kind of says what Phil's saying,
Yeah.
stronger.
and worship isn't just a series, an agenda on the bulletin.
Yeah.
Quite the contrary, it's meant to be a way of patterning us to do good, to do well in the world.
And what was it at the end of the service, Pastor said he believed that worship is the heart of it all.
Oh, well, I wasn't here, so I can't comment that.
Well,
He was probably, he probably didn't realize I wasn't there.
he wasn't there.
Yeah.
Well,
Either that or they could get away with it.
to your question of why maybe Martin Luther didn't like this, I wondered last week as I was just kind of scanning over this. Is it because maybe it talks a lot about watching your tongue and not getting angry? Things like that. Would that be why you didn't care for James very much?
I think among other things, that might just be the reason.
Because there are several references.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, that's one of the themes is controlling the tongue. That's funny. Look at 2:14. 2:14. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but do not have works? Can faith save you? That's interesting. If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill, and yet you do nothing to supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead. Wow, that's a great statement. Yeah, that's for me the best statement in the book practically.
It's so similar to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and soul and mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. That it's both. It's not one or the other, but it's both.
Yeah. That's called the double love command. It's right across. The double love. The summary of the law. The summary of the Ten Commandments and the law itself.
I mean, he's even got the same word. I mean, the man
Yeah.
once says, what's the greatest of all the commandments? And Jesus
Yeah.
says, you start with loving the Lord, and that goes on to you loving your neighbor. And it's the same thing here. You start with faith, but that goes on to how you take care of your neighbor.
And they, in some way, I find that they merge. I mean, it's not do this and do this. For me, there is a melding, I guess I would think, of these two, not to be separated. Just another one or two. He really comes down hard on the rich. Look at chapter 5. First, come now, you rich people, weep and wail for the miseries that are coming on you. Your riches have rotted and your clothes are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have rusted, and their rust will be evidence against you, and it will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure for the last days. Listen, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you, the undocumented aliens, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. Wow, ain't that good?
I mean,
You have lived on the earth in luxury and in pleasure. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous one who does not exist.
well, now, if we think we have disparity between the rich and the poor, you know, we might be 20/80. They were like 5/95. So, you know, the rich were really the just, well, basically the slave owners, you know. They owned all the property. You worked for a rich person. I mean, most people. So that was, you know, they were very small.
Well, what does, yes, I agree. What does this tell you then? This attack on the rich about James' ministry and that of his brother. I mean, we don't often think of Jesus as attacking the rich. But maybe that's what got him killed. Maybe that's what got James killed. In one way or another, and maybe by some kind of path. What does that tell you? We have not emphasized that as part of Jesus' primary ministry, have we? I mean, we know about treasures in heaven and all of that.
You know, it's kind of interesting about the rich here. I just wonder how philanthropic the rich were back then versus now, because if you look at, you know, guys like Les Wexner, he started from nothing, and he built up this business. He gave all these jobs to thousands and thousands of people all over the country and the world and everything else. And then what does he do? Then he gives and gives and gives and gives. And even his wife, you know, like this thing that had that New Albany France, and I mean, was all for charity. And so I just wondered, back then, was it different? You know, I mean,
That just shows how wrong it is to draw generality. I'm not quitting Les Wexner or Bill Gates or anybody. I don't know. And I'm not acquitting you. You know, I don't know whether we fit the category of rich or not.
well, even within this church, I mean, there's people that have done very well in this church, and they've given heavily. Because of their riches, they've been able to do some things that somebody that was poorer could not do.
And we were talking, Jerry and I, before we started, about the generosity of so many people today, you know, piling up that food bank, remember, that warehouse, Mid-Ohio, and Joseph's Coat, and so forth. It's hard to know where to put yourself.
But then Jerry's thing here, when Jerry's talking about this personal relationship in giving, I think we lose that, kind of, don't we? Maybe some people that go directly down to First English and take care of some of these and meet these people directly and everything, but for the most part, most of us, I think, in our church, it's more of a...
Yeah. Well, would you say that, on the whole, though, the church needs more attention in that direction?
I think church is one of the most valuable assets we have in this country is our giving, especially compared to other countries. I mean, our giving from our churches is incredible, and it's one of the sources for the poor that just aren't there in a lot of places.
Well, and Jerry, why don't you say what we were talking about, that the heck with all the federal programs, let's let the church do. The church does a better job, or.
And you know, here we got a tax bill that's gonna cut off charitable donations, write-offs for charitable donate. We're gonna discourage people from giving donations with a new tax bill.
Why would we do that?
You know, I don't know, but you know, that's the kind of thinking we have in Washington right now. And you know, and like I said before, I think the churches and community centers and philanthropic organizations, I look at what Bill Gates has done. He has done more for the health of the world probably than every government program we've ever done.
Than the United Nations even.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm becoming convinced, because the government is so volatile and political, and they're using poor people as chess pieces,
Yeah,
as pawns.
good.
And, you know, it's time to get rid of that. Now, if we can't do, when we're over in Norway and, you know, up there where they take care of their people, they don't know what it is to have poor people.
Yeah.
All that means is you have a limited income, and you stay home, but you have a limited income. If you want to live that way, well, that's your problem.
And
You know.
they're losing.
And yeah. So, you know,
No,
it's really interesting.
I think we need to speak truth to power, and we're only doing it in here. But I think we need the courage, whether it does anything or not, and then move in the direction we know is important. I guess what I hear thank you.
I guess what I read in James helps me better to see Jesus. And if that's the case, then I can't agree with Luther at all. I understand maybe why he had his reservations. But on the other hand, there's so much here. I think you probably agree with me, because the conversation has been very positive and constructive.
I was with in East Germany. And it was the rich people. They had to pay so much of whatever they had, you know. They made them actually poor. Because it was too much. They had no choice.
To the government?
To the government, yeah, yes.
I'm thinking of the example in Russia of how the oligarchs are part and parcel of the government. I mean, you know, their influence is so powerful, they're partners with the government in ways that then keep the poor poor.
So what's different here?
I don't know. I wonder.
I don't think there's any difference. The wealthy have their way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what it's hard, you know, what to do, because we have so little power. We have so much power, lobbying and so forth. Well, so we leave a lot of questions dangling in the air here, but I think we better understand James, or we not better understand, yeah, we better understand James, and include that in our repertoire of what it means to be Christian.
Thank you again, Walter, for a wonderful session that we had this fall. We appreciate you a lot. Thank you. As we pray our prayer today, over the next month and a half, till we are back together again in this group, we will be going in all different directions for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for the holidays with our kids, with everyday life. So this prayer suddenly has an extra meaning. So as we pray it today, think through where we are headed over the next month and a half. Lord God,
You have called your servants to ventures of which we cannot see the end, by paths that yet untrodden, through perils unknown. Give us faith to go out with courage, not knowing where we go, but only that your hand is leading us, and your love supporting us. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
I didn't show you James's bones.
Where'd you get them? Are these relics?
Same place I got my fish.
Yeah, that was my next question. Do we have to pay the same?
Yeah. Look in there, nothing's in there.
And how much are they worth?
No.
Why did you ask me?
Oh, we kinda did. It was only 6 years.
this is it.
Hey, how many are going to Max and Irma's?
How big a table should we get?
How big a table? We're gonna head down in one.
You need to get their attention first.
Everybody, raise your hand if you're gonna head to Max and Irma's.
Okay, 6. All right.
Plus Boulder and maybe, might be more than that.
I gotta take one. I mean, it's like take a push and stay on table.
I'm going to run down to the.
When you're getting
No,
sick,
yeah.
early,
So hard.
and it's not exciting, but I like having the table.
Yeah, I like that part. About a half hour. Start talking to me.
Heard me squeaking the table, that's because I can't sit still.
Aramaic inscription is believed to be the 2,000-year-old ossuary, the bone box of the brother of Jesus of Nazareth.
What it says is Yaakov or Jacob or James in its anglicized form, Bar, son of
Busy time of the year for preaching, isn't it?
he was the brother of Yeshua, Jesus. James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus.
That's on the side of the box.
That inscription
Oh, that's right. When is it?
captivated the world.
When the news of the James ossuary broke in the autumn of 2002, the ancient artifact very rapidly became the focus of international interest and debate. Where did it come from? Was James really the brother of Jesus? And the biggest question of all, is the bone box genuine or is it in fact a fraud? Two-time Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker Simcha Yakubovich landed the world exclusive to the story. Although, to date, most of his films have focused on Jewish themes, Yakubovich, an Orthodox Jew, found the topic fascinating.
As somebody interested in history, I was, blown away because suddenly you had an artifact that the whole world was saying, wow, could this really be it? So I was immediately drawn. As a filmmaker, I was very privileged to have something that the whole world wanted and I had unique access. We were able to bring our cameras behind the scenes and take viewers behind the scenes in an exclusive way.
Yakubovich's well-paced investigative documentary entitled James, Brother of Jesus, answers the question of the authenticity of the find.
I give time to everybody, the people who say it's a forgery and the people who say it's authentic. But I think that at the end of the day, people who watch the film will be convinced, as I was making it, that this thing is the real thing, that has been authenticated by every test that modern science can throw at it.
For the first time, the world will get a chance to view the James ossuary right here in Toronto in the building directly behind me, the Royal Ontario Museum. But its journey to Toronto was not without incident. Damaged en route from Israel, the ancient priceless artifact was cracked in a number of places. Once restored, however, the James ossuary would draw record-breaking numbers to the Royal Ontario Museum.
If this is real, then this is the vine of the millennium, maybe the 2 millennia, because this is an artifact that overarches all the artifacts. This is not someone's tongue, ear, finger, head, ankle, whatever, vertebrae. This is an inscription saying Jesus existed in the 1st century.
Isn't that interesting? So, it's still debated, but I think we're coming down on the side that it is true.
Is there something on YouTube about that?
Yeah, there's a number of them. That was a YouTube.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing about how they discovered it.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Or has it been around for a while? It just didn't-
2002 is where it was, when it came to our,
Yeah, we just got back
world,
then.
There's not any bones in it, right?
Huh?
No bones in there.
No,
It's just the
yeah.
receptacle.
Yeah, the way they did it was they let a body decay over a year. And then they put the bones, brush them, and put them in the box. Ossuary. And putting them in the ossuaries, that kind of box, only happened about 50 BC to about 100 AD. It's pretty well defined around Israel, around Jerusalem, when these
Tell me all about it.
it's a very interesting artifact. And you're gonna read something that says Nad in
I am.
but I think if you look at it more carefully through somebody's
And
eyes,
I won't.
you'll feel the same way. It would be, it is interesting.
Yeah. My youngest daughter had a miniature surgery on January 3rd.